of the morning brushback. Bobby, that's a lot of numbers. That's 5 dozen even. How do you feel about this?
I feel like we're probably going to get to 600 episodes by the end of the summer.
Will we ever hit our
Oh wait,
stride?
end of
That's the
next summer.
question. Are we any better at this today than we were 59 episodes ago?
I feel like I'm
That's
I'm
bad.
probably
It's a
I'm probably
bad
bogging you.
initial.
I'm bogging you down on your podcast. But me personally, I am killing the podcast game.
Hmm. Well, thanks for being here today. If you are new or if you're a returner to our show, obviously, if you're listening on Twitter or YouTube, you can leave a comment. So if you're interested in interacting with us, feel free. I monitor the YouTube and Bobby monitors Periscope. So Robert, what are our topics today?
So today we're getting to the end of fall baseball season for a lot of players. So we're going to talk a little bit about ramping down throwing, good, bad idea, partnership MLB with some of the independent leagues, and what else do we got, Dan? Anything? We have and more.
And more. Well, we're going to talk about whether it's better to be a good player on a bad team or a bad player on a good team, or if you should leave teams if you're not getting playing time, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is a very wide-ranging and interesting topic. I did a Twitter poll about this, so we will talk about these fine results that we got from this poll. So first, let's talk about this MLB partner organization thing.
Well, we don't know much about it other than they decided
Very
to partner.
vague.
Frontier League, Atlantic League, and American Association of all. Those are the three main independent leagues in the U.S. Have all partnered with MLB. So by some of the stuff I'm reading, it sounds like that the MLB is going to incorporate some rules, maybe some rule changes, and test them out, similar to what they did in the Atlantic League with the automated strike zone, the stealing of first base, what they're currently doing now with we're starting a runner on second and the California rule for extra innings. What I did see is that the American Association is not a full partnership. I could be wrong about that, but they did push back. Their league lawyer actually tweeted out and said they won't be doing any rule changes. It's still a play to win league. So I don't know if they're trying to break the curve there and separate themselves a little bit from the Atlantic League or Frontier League, but it sounds like that they want to break away and be more of still like a true independent league while still being able to send players to MLB.
Well, the Atlantic League rules were hated. I mean, some of them were asinine. The stealing first base thing is asinine. It was just ridiculous. Moving the mound back 2 feet. Like those are all things that like guys who are released from the majors or AAA or AA, they don't want to deal with that nonsense. They're trying to get back to the major leagues, not be in this carnival show. The stealing first base thing is ridiculous. The mound moving back was ridiculous. The not being able to pick to first base, ridiculous. Like, so I applaud the American Association for not wanting to get in that just load of nonsense. Like, hey, let's keep our league the one that if guys don't want to do all that BS, they'll come to the American Association. I think it's a valid position to take.
And they have been for all accounts, the American Association has been the league that has been producing the most talent out of the independent leagues as far as talent going back to minor league baseball. They're right in the middle. Frontier League, for anyone that doesn't know, so the Atlantic League, if you had a hierarchy of independent leagues, the Atlantic League is the most experienced league. The American Association, average age-wise, is the next most experienced league, and the Frontier League is the youngest league. So if you're in the Frontier League, you're usually a guy right out of college or maybe a guy who's got a year rookie ball that's been released. American Association has some guys where it's a mix. You have to have a certain amount of rookies on the roster. I believe it's 5 rookies. And the Atlantic League is basically like your veteran league. You've got guys that have usually, some teams have guys with big league time, AAA time, AA time. So if we're going by, projectable talent that still has some years left on their prime, American Association is probably that league.
Yeah, that's correct. And I took issue with you saying like producing talent. I mean, the independent leagues don't really produce talent. Like, but to your point, you're right. There's more like guys with years left. There's more guys who are very talented from 25 to 27 years of age in the American Association, whereas the Atlantic League is all There's a lot more of like 27 to 32-year-olds where teams are just like, yeah, we know what that guy can do. He like got 8 years in the minors already. We're not really interested. Whereas there's some guys who are more unproven that like you said, if you're 26 throwing 94 to 96 in the American Association, that's different than if you're 30 throwing 94 to 96 in the Atlantic League, right?
Right.
So yeah, that does seem like it's the tipping point where it's not as high a level of play as the Atlantic League, but there's again more viable talent. I think that's the way to put it. And of course, there's also the American or the Pecos League, which is, I mean, I know it offends people when I say it, but it's a junk league. It is what it is. Like you make $200 in salary and you play on like high school fields in front of no people. And there's some guys that will throw in the 90s there and like get signed, but it's a junk league. Let's just be honest with each other. So
it's definitely a pay to play league.
Yeah. I mean, just because you have some guys that get signed because they have a tool or, a second tool or whatever, it doesn't make it not a junk league. So anyway, and of course there's what's the other one? It's also the Northeast. It just like falls between the Frontier League and the American Association.
There's the league. So there's the like league. It's not a bubble league, but there's 4 teams out of Michigan. I think it's the ASPBL, right?
No, not that one. The Can-Am. Does the Can-Am League still exist, or is that gone?
No, Can-Am League merged.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah, that other league, I'm not interested in talking about that either.
Yeah. But so, the Can-Am League made the American Association a 16-team league or an 18-team league, something. I mean, it's a big league now. You're talking a lot of teams spread out over the U.S. and some in Canada. But if you're the American Association, that's a good move not to fully partner. I think if I'm going to incorporate rules and try and make baseball a little more different and fan friendly, I'm going to the Dominican, to Taiwan, and see what these teams do that are drawing fans, because baseball is very popular across the globe as a spectator sport. Like Japan draws well.
What are you saying right now?
I'm just
spectator sport. What other kind of
this is my podcasting?
What other kind of sport would it be?
The WNBA, just a sport that's a sport.
Okay, just
but
hate on women Friday. Good job, Robert.
WNBA is not a spectator sport. It's tough to watch.
Okay, no comment. But so the partner leagues, it doesn't seem like there's anything. It just like it's a very vague, nebulous thing at the moment, right? Like they didn't announce anything. Like we were just scanning these articles and they really didn't give any details about what being a partner league with the MLB means.
I feel like there's going to be something coming down the pipeline that a lot of these teams, the 40 teams or so that got axed from affiliated minor league ball, are going to somehow filter their way into these leagues, and they're going to become like real, like larger independent leagues with maybe 16 to 20 teams. Because the Atlantic League right now is 7 teams. American Association, I believe, is 16. I think the Frontier League is 12 teams. I feel like these leagues are about to get a boost in teams, which could be good. I mean, who knows? That's the nice thing about the Atlantic League is the proximity of all the teams. Everything's really close.
Yeah, and proximity to Wawa is strong in the Atlantic League. There's a Wawa within 15 minutes of every ballpark, so that's always a plus. But yeah, I think it's going to also have something to do with, because I think the Atlantic League had some partnership with MLB before, like they did with all the nonsense rules. But before that, they still had one, which was it just made the transfer of contracts easier, and that was all like legal partnership stuff that I didn't really understand, but it just was simpler for someone to buy an Atlantic League player's contract and he's just like quickly gone. So I know they had that contract transfer sort of thing going on. So I assume that's going to continue, and they'll probably make it even easier where, because, they buy your rights and they have to pay the team to own you now. And then they get to, do their thing. But so let's talk about this poll that I put on Twitter. So yes. What's best for an athlete's development? And I gave 3 options, kind of be the big fish in a small pond, tiny fish in a huge pond, or fighting to stay alive in a big pond. So the 3 options you could pick were best player on a bad team, bad player on a great team, or fight for playing time on a good team. So before I reveal this poll, and I guess I can screen share Well, I'll screen share in a second. What do you think the results were, Robert?
I gotta imagine most people, out of fear of being wrong, said fight for playing time on a good team.
Do you think there's a fear of being wrong on anonymous Twitter polls?
Yeah, I do. I feel like people don't want to get the wrong answer, regardless if it's anonymous.
I was pleasantly surprised at the results. This is the result you would hope for. I mean, you and I don't know that anyone that you and I know would, without having like, all the nuance and context of like everyone's situation is different, right? Like we get that. Sometimes there are definitely times to leave your team, find a new team. Obviously there's a million scenarios, but on the whole, I don't know. I can't imagine anyone that I know, like a coach or a player who played at a high level, who would not choose the last option, which is fight for playing time on a good team.
So I mean, I'll push back slightly and say we're talking about development, right? Like how am I going to get a lot better as a player, personal player?
I'm talking about overall in your career.
Because I actually did this in high school. Like I had the chance to go to, and there were other factors for a reason I didn't go to the best baseball high school in Chicago. I went to a small school that was not good, but the big fish in a little pond. If you're already a good player, if you're looking for, it depends on what you're looking for. I think in some regards, like, are you looking to get playing time right away? I mean, I also did that with college personally. It's not that I don't want to be around good players, but I want to, like, if you stand out, you have a better chance of, making a little bit further, I think. That's just my opinion.
That it. Well, so there's lots of different grades here. So if you were playing on like a really good, and this was the context of the person that tweeted this thing, so basically someone's stuff came on my Twitter feed, and this guy was giving out advice, and I don't know what his playing background was, but I don't think it was significant after like high school, but he was just like giving advice, looking back on his time playing ball, whatever. So one of his things was, he said that he was on like some elite teams and put a lot of pressure on himself because he didn't get as much playing time. So when he got playing time, he'd go out in the field, he'd put too much pressure on himself, make a lot of errors. Then it got worse, blah, blah, blah. And then finally he said, like, my advice is to play on a bad team so that you can get your chances and like not do that. And I just absolutely hated that advice. I hate like the way that he painted that picture was, I'm kind of mentally weak. I can't handle competing on this team, even though it sounded like he belonged on the team, like he got chances. But he just like choked under pressure consistently and put pressure on himself, and then was like, oh, I don't want this. I should have just like been on the easier team. So for me, that seems like the wrong thing, because it's like, okay, well, why don't you fix your mindset and do some other things, find a mentor, and maybe that's the root problem rather than the fact that the team is too, because it doesn't sound like the team was the problem. It sounds like he was the problem. I don't know. Based on the way I describe that, how does my take?
Based on the way you describe it, I feel like the guy we're talking about couldn't hang on that team.
I feel like he ran from that team.
But I'll relate it to basketball, where you've got like back when LeBron left the Cavs to go team up with better players to win. Like, the competitive side of me thinks, don't you want to compete against those other good players instead of teaming up with them and making it easier on yourself? Granted, LeBron is obviously the best player, but I see it like, if he would have framed it that way, like, look, I want to compete against these guys. I don't want to just team up and take the easy way out. Not that it would be an easy way out, but I also like the guys that are on teams that, like, let's not say they're the worst team, but they're a 500 team. They're an average team. Like, I want to compete with guys that I know will go compete with me, even if we're not as talented. Does that help your development? I mean, I think overall, development wise, being around the best players makes you a better player. You can't just be around guys that aren't as talented, and it's like running sprints. Like, if you're the fastest guy and you nobody pushes you to be first in the sprints, at the end of practice, you're not getting any faster or any better. But if
Agreed.
there's always some guy who's pushing you, like that makes you a better player. But I can see where being on a worse team and having the competitive mindset would be beneficial.
But I don't think other teams push you as much as your own team pushes you, especially in long-term development for a player.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's a crapshoot who you play. It's not against the NBA. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. The word development here is the separating factor, right? Like if I'm just trying to be the best player that I can be, I want to be around the other really, really good players because it's either going to like a poop or get off the pot, right? Like rise up to the level that everybody else is, or you're just going to fall behind.
I'm surprised you didn't curse there. Yeah,
I was trying my best.
Well, and I mean, so we've talked about like you don't like kids playing down a level. Like you don't want them to playing 14U if they can play 15U, and that's kind of the same thing, right? But I mean, the thing with baseball, especially, is it's a preparation sport, and that's why I think having teammates that push you, that you have to work harder. Like if you're on a team, if you go to Vanderbilt and you're not on a full scholarship, which most guys in baseball are not on a full scholarship anyway. But if you're aware, like you go to a Vanderbilt type school, and you're not one of their top guys. You weren't a 5th round draft pick. You weren't a 10th round draft pick. Like you're just an undrafted guy, but you're good, obviously. And they give you like, a little bit of money. You know that you're not like in the starting lineup. You know that you're not, right? So what are you doing? You're learning from all these other players. You're trying to say, what does he do? What does he do? What does he do? And all right, how can I build my skyscraper bigger than his? Right? There's huge benefits to being in the mix, but having to be pushed by your teammates to break through. Whereas if that same player goes to a lower school, say like a Belmont, which is a good baseball school, like again, but they're like not Vanderbilt, right? They're also in Nashville. Now that guy can maybe start as a freshman. Maybe that's good for him, but also maybe it's not. Like if he could get on the field at Vanderbilt and get to that level, that's probably going to push him higher than suddenly going somewhere else where he's the best person. But then we've also talked about situations where, because I had a guy I grew up with in high school, or we played together through middle school. He moved away, was the North Carolina State Player of the Year, went to the University of North Carolina to pitch for the Tar Heels, never pitched. Like he was there with Andrew Miller and Daniel Bard and all those other guys. He was legit and he never pitched. So
I think that's the separate. So, because I do give a lot of college advice, and my number one advice outside of like choosing a school that you're going to be happy at school wise is, are you going to get a chance to get on the field? We've got a lot. I coach an all-star fall team, and a lot of these kids go to bigger schools like Louisville, Oklahoma, and those are awesome baseball schools. You're going to be around tons and tons of talent. But are you going to get one shot to be on the field and then never get back on the field? Like it's, as much as you want to compete, sometimes it is out of your hands. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so the nuance of the term, again, as we're getting to, there's lots of scenarios. There's a million scenarios. If you're in the mix where you could get to the field, but you're not there yet, like you're the 6th guy and you want to be a weekend starter, right? You're the 5th starter, whatever. You're the backup shortstop. If you are in the mix to get playing time at some point, then I think it's good. It's the right move for you to be in the pack. If you have no shot of being on the field, then you probably need to transfer. You need to find another team. Like that's the difference. Like, if you're just going to get 20 innings, if you're just going to you're going to play every 4th game at shortstop, and that's that, right? You're going to be the backup catcher the whole season and never crack the lineup. Yeah. But if you're like, I'm pretty good as a shortstop and I could maybe take Bobby if I put in a little more work and like I get my chances and Bobby slips up, I think I should stay there and let Bobby push me and chase him and be on his heels. And again, it's not just like one season. It's like the scope of your career too. Like being on good teams with good players that you learn from and you feed off of. And there's a benefit to that. So
there's definitely a benefit to get to making you better. But like to your point of the Vanderbilt kid, if he's good enough to go to Vanderbilt, he's probably good enough to go to Belmont, be the starter for 3 years, and then get drafted, as opposed to going to Vanderbilt. Granted, I don't know the situation at Vanderbilt, and there's so many different scenarios here, but I would assume Vanderbilt's got an established starting shortstop. if he's a shortstop. They've got the established starting shortstop. So does it benefit this kid to start 3 years at Belmont and play against Vanderbilt and all those other schools, or does it benefit him to go to Vanderbilt and maybe sit 2 years and get a chance to start his junior year and then have a chance to get drafted? Because if we are talking about getting drafted, you have to be on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to your buddy from North Carolina, like his career path is totally different if he goes to, UNC Wilmington and is their Friday night guy every day. So there is something to be said about opportunity.
Friday night guy every day. You can be a Friday night guy all 7 days. You're the Friday night guy, but you're also the Tuesday night guy. That's awesome.
We used to play when I played Chicago State in college. They used to start their guy. They only had like 2 starters because Chicago State was like just not a fully funded Division I program. They'd start the guy on Friday, then he'd come back and start Tuesday. Then he would start Sunday. Then he would start Friday. So he had like 15 starts in a college season, which is absurd. Excuse me, like 18 to 20 starts. He started like a third of their college games. But opportunity knocks,
I guess. Well, and of course, like using Vanderbilt here is a bad example because when you get to schools like that, they will have like a Dansby Swanson who's like penciled in. And of course he earned that spot or, whatever, but still you can get to the spot where it's like you essentially have a Derek Jeter playing short and you're not going to play short no matter what happens unless he's hit by a train. So those are slightly different situations, but in most other colleges around the country below like probably the top SEC schools, like the really top echelon, that's not really going to be the case. Like if you have 2 legit guys, they kind of get to duke it out. I mean, would you agree with that?
I agree, but I also agree that outside of those big schools, you should probably seek out the better playing opportunity. Like I'll use my college, Northern Illinois, as an example, is a mid-major MAC school, right? So let's use all MAC schools outside of Kent State. You probably have a chance to battle for a spot. So if it's between Northern Illinois and Central Michigan, I'm probably going to weigh which team has an established shortstop, and I'll go the other way just because it's an easier path to playing time.
Agree. And I think
onset.
Yeah, and I think the distinction here is that there is no we're not talking. This doesn't really apply to picking which one D1 school over another unless it's like a massive difference, right? Like going to university, SEC versus like University of Buffalo or someplace that's just lesser. If you're talking about picking Kent State over University of Ohio and you get to play more at one than the other, there's no difference. Like they're both mid-majors, right? Like there's no difference. You're both going to get pushed. You're both going to have the same level of training. Like you're both going to have good coaching. Like there's no real difference, right? But you are talking about something different if it's like I could play low-level D1 versus otherwise my options are D3. I'll start for all 4 years of D3, or I might have to really scrap it out to get on the field at D1. That's the difference that I'm talking about. I think that if you really want to see what you're made of and like be a good player and like at the end of the day look back and know exactly how good you could have been, you need to go to the D1 and be pushed, even though it's uncertain, versus dropping a major level. But again, like picking between one mid-tier and the other D1, like that's not in this category what I'm talking about. But I am talking about like high-level travel ball versus junky travel ball, or 15U versus playing down 14U, or travel ball versus playing in-house. Those are big differences. Like if you're a travel-minded player and you choose to play like for a really bad team just to get start all the time or to play in-house, that's not a good developmental move. Like going down to play in-house and hitting 650 is not good for you.
Yeah, I mean the flip side of that coin is, are you with a program that like has good coaching, like you're getting better and you see yourself getting better with those coaches, even though your team is a middling team, because there is politics in youth baseball as well. Like if you're on a good travel team, there might be a dad coach and that kid might play the position.
Also true.
You might not get a shot to start. So
also true.
If all things equal, right? Like cost aside, no politics. Yeah. If I'm going to put you on a field, like I would prefer myself to be put on the field with the 12 best players, and they're like the best guys are going to filter through into the lineup. But not in most situations in life, things are not fair. Like things are not set in stone like that. But if you're a parent and you're looking at where should I send my kid, team A over here is, was 50-5 all summer. Like, they're unbelievable, and they've got an opening and they're doing a tryout. And my team was 20-20, and, we're pretty good. And my son bats third and plays shortstop every game. I'll bring him to that tryout, but you're going to get a real good sense of the dynamic of the team as soon as you go to the tryout. You're going to see who's running the tryout. You're going to see the kids on the dads on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be better off staying on that 20-20 team if you notice your son getting significant playing time, and he's, I also see the benefit of being on the field if you're playing a lot of games like that as a young player.
Yeah. So here's the Twitter poll. I'm pretty sure everyone can see this. I'm screen sharing, but I can't actually tell.
I can.
You can see it. You can see it?
I can see it.
Okay. So yeah, 84% said fight for playing time on a good team. 3% said bad player on a great team. I think makes sense, because again, like, if you're just not going to smell the field, that's not a good situation. Like, you're just a cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
And best player on a bad team, again, it does depend. I mean, from my experience, when we start our academy teams in my former town of Bloomington Normal, we got like D-level players our first year, because the political nature of baseball in our town was very strong. Everyone was afraid to leave the Bloomington Normal Baseball Association, which was run by the pretty much all the local high school coaches coached in that summer league, but they just did a piss poor job. I mean, terrible job. And yet they forced every kid to play it, essentially, because everyone's afraid they're not going to play at high school. So everyone, pays their $1,000 just to get a jersey. They don't practice one time in the winter. They just show up and then they write a political lineup. Like, that's what everyone dealt with. And they were pissed about it. And they're like, guys, please make your own academy teams. Please, please, please. And then we finally did. And then you know what happened? No one came with us because they were afraid. Mm-hmm. So we scraped together.
Oh, might have lost Dan here. I'll keep going. So to Dan's point, like, when we started travel teams, it was the same situation. People are afraid to leave their team, what have you, and you end up with poor teams that have, they struggle a lot in their first year, and parents are always looking for the next best thing. Where if I'm a parent and my son's getting a lot better, he's improving, that might be a place that you stay, and you kind of ride out the bumps and bruises, and your team gets a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and your son is a part of that. If you're constantly jumping ship, and we've talked about this on the show in the past, if you're constantly somebody who's jumping ship, going to a different team, you're on 3 teams in 4 years, 4 teams in 6 years, and that's also a bad look. At some point, you either need to compete for your spot on the team, or you need to stick it out. And if you're the best player on that team, like, you need to try and lift up the talent of some of your other guys. Hey, Dan, welcome back. Thanks for having me.
Had a little technical issue, but
I just piggyback off of what you said.
I heard what you were saying. And so my story was basically that, so we got like D-level players, like kids that like weren't going to play summer ball, but then they're like, okay, we'll do it. Kids that got cut from the other teams. But we were like, look, like, you guys know us, like, we're really good instructors. We're going to like coach your faces off. We're going to practice more. We're going to practice like a lot. And we did all those things. And so if you looked on the surface, like, it made sense to go with our lower level team, even though we weren't like advertising a lower level team. We didn't have a history, right? So it wasn't like you knew you were joining a bad team. It just ended up being a relatively not great team because we just couldn't get good players. But so, we were that team one year, I guess, is my point, where it made, if from an outsider, you could say, okay, they're not going to be strong. I know who's on the team. Like, I know these kids, but we'll join because we know they're going to get good coaching. That was a valid choice, right? So there is that sometimes, depending as well. But so yeah, I mean,
it's hard to take in like the development versus success, because kids mature at different ages, right? Kids get the
Mhm.
best teams at the younger levels are always the most physically mature teams.
Yep. Mhm.
That's not a secret. So if your
Mhm.
son just is not physically mature like that, but he's got good skills, just I would honestly highly suggest getting him on a team where he's going to get to be on the field. Because if he's a fifth grader on a team of other fifth graders that look like they're in seventh grade and he looks like he's in fifth grade, he's just they're not going to give him the shot because there's no reason to. Like, they're physically overpowering every team. Your son's not just, he can't do that. He doesn't fit that mold. It might be good for his development to
But
be around those good players, but if he never gets on the field, something you have to weigh, like Dan was saying earlier, like you have to weigh playing, like being on the field, because the be it the the distance. I'm drawing a blank on the word I want to use, but if you're in the same room as all these other good players, yeah, you're learning by watching. You're getting a little better by that and pushing you. But if you're not going to get on the field to actually try out some of these skills, it might benefit you more to be on a team that's, I'm not saying go from team A to team Z, but go to team A to team F and get on the field and actually, as long as you're being surrounded by good instructors and someone that can, help you along the way.
yeah, I agree. And also, but again, that also presupposes that like there's just no shot like you're going to compete because you're too small. I mean, there's still, and it's still like, again, baseball, the thing to remember is you're not being pushed by players during the season, not as much. You're not being pushed by your opponents. Like, sure, it's probably better if you want to play pro baseball to play for a bottom tier Pac-12 team or a bad SEC team because you're facing all those SEC teams, right? Rather than play like mid-tier D1 baseball if you had a chance. So that might be a spot where you level up. But again, like the difference between being pushed by your teammates on a mid-tier D1 versus a bottom feeder Pac-12 team, that's not a difference. Like, you're not missing out on anything by just having a losing record in the Pac-12 versus having a winning record in the MAC or something, right? So that's, but at younger levels, you do need slightly better competition. You can't thrive facing in-house pitching. Like, hitting 650 against in-house junk pitching or against junk travel pitching isn't better for you than facing better competition. But the competition, like, you only like really rise to that level to a degree, and really you end up in large part expressing what your preparation was. So you don't just get better being on a better team facing better competition, like if you just didn't spend all off season preparing and hitting and hitting and hitting. And that's part of my point is where, if because we signed a lot of kids to our academy where we're like, hey, you're going to be like fifth outfielder on paper, so you better work your butt off for the next 8 months if you want to be on the field. And they're like, okay, and they get to work. And that's a very real effect. Whereas you get a kid who knows he's going to play, he doesn't have to do that, right? And so even if he still does get to play that next season, he didn't spend as much time training because he had that fear because someone was chasing him in the off season. So anyway, this is a good conversation. I'm glad that you took kind of like you kind of let us butt heads a little bit, because I mean, there's so many scenarios. There's just like a million scenarios, and there's hard.
There's a lot of times.
General,
I want to, before we switch over, there's a lot of times where I've got kids who are definitely going to be like the backup middle infielder or the fourth outfielder on our, our top team at a certain age level in the high school program. And I'll ask them flat out. I said, look, you're going to get half the at-bats all summer. Like, that's just how it's going to go. I'm telling you right now, we know these other guys, they're going to get the majority of the at-bats. They're the premier guys. What do you want to do? Would you rather be the starter on the second team, or do you want to be on the top team? And it's usually split, because there is something to be said for being on the field. I mean, kids don't want to sit on the bench and watch, like, especially if you're competitive. If you're competitive and someone tells you, like, look, you're only going to get half the at-bats, and I don't see any way you're going to get more than that, it's like, well, screw it. I'm going to go get all the at-bats and show you that I was better than all these guys. So, I mean, it's 50-50. I feel like too, when you let the kids make their own decision. Like, some kids just want to be on a good team. They don't care if they play, which I feel like is a bad mindset as well. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll be a backup. Like, that's fine.
Hmm. Yeah. And I had to scrap it. I mean, I was on, just for context, I was on bad teams my whole life. I mean, I was on a winning team with the Long Island Ducks, and I didn't even make it the whole season. I didn't pitch well. That was my last season. I got released. Other winning teams? No. Half season with Lake County, we were 20-10. That was really fun. But I mean, every year in college, we were 15-35. So it sucks being on a losing team.
Mm-hmm.
But it does push you to like do more. But at the same time, you don't also learn winning culture. Being on a losing team perpetually, or just like you learn a little bit to be a loser. It's hard because you can't outrun a losing team as one player. Like, it's not basketball. You can't just LeBron put everyone on your back in baseball. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
Even if you're a stud pitcher. I mean, my third season, I started the year with before I blew my elbow out, I had a 1.06 ERA and 40 plus innings as a starter. And I was, I think, 1-4, or like 1-3 or 1-2. Like I had a losing record. And like stuff like that, like you again, it doesn't matter how good you are, you can't really and you see that in the major leagues, like Jacob deGrom. How many years does he have like a 500 record? You can't win baseball games by yourself. So
no, you're right.
And there is something to be said for learning how to win. Being around teams where guys are greater than the sum of their parts, that's a very real thing. And scouts appreciate that stuff too, where they see like, and I think Dansby Swanson's probably a good example. I don't know that much about him. I haven't watched him that much, but he's not like a guy that wows you. Not really. He's like what is he? Slightly above average big league shortstop, average big league shortstop.
I think so.
I don't know that he wows anybody. He doesn't hit 40 jacks. He doesn't do anything crazy, but I think he seems like a greater than the sum of his parts kind of guy. A really high character, makes really heads up plays. Like, he made a heads up play I saw in highlights the other day. But he's just like a really smart baseball player, and I imagine that he was someone that like helped all the troops get better as, you know, the tight situations come up. And being on really good teams where that atmosphere, and that one season when we were winning in Lake County, my team was like that. We just like knew you almost couldn't beat us. Like, it was just like, if it was 2-1 and we were down, like we were going to find a way to push across a run. Like, we just knew that we were, and someone stepped up, and there was like an energy that who's going to step up today? Who's going to step up? And we got so many hits from like the bottom of the lineup to win games. And there is something to be said for that. And having spent almost my entire career losing games, being on bad teams, it's very different when then you're suddenly on a winning team like that. And you're like, wow, this is like a special thing. And you learn to win too. So
yeah, winning is fun. I agree.
Yeah. But you have to learn to compete, and you have to learn to win. And guys show you how to win. And you see it in your teammates. Like, if you're around some guys who refuse to lose and they really don't like it, and that's more uncommon than people realize, you start to see it when they're like, screw this. Like, we're getting runs this inning. Whereas bad teams, you just like go up and you have your bats and you just like accept losing to a degree. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to cover there. All right, what's our next topic, Robert? Let's move on here.
So last thing I want to talk about is we're getting to the end of fall baseball, probably in the next few weeks for a lot of players. And there's always a discussion, you know, I'm shutting it, like, so we've got guys, I'm shutting it down until January 1st. I'm shutting it down for 6 weeks. I'm shutting it down, you know, or I keep playing catch. So I guess my question to you as a pitcher is what did you do after the season was over? Did you completely shut down? Did you just go into like put your arm into hibernation for a certain amount of time? Do you see any benefit in that? Do you see the negatives in that?
So I talked about this on my personal podcast recently, and there is also a lot of nuance to this. So if you go on the ASMI's website, pitchsmart.org, that website gives parents all of the info about safe pitch counts. It gives you all the risk factors for injuries. It's a really good resource for what to do and what not to do, but there's still context there that's needed. So number one, like they say, take 3 months off every year from competitive pitching. which is valid advice. But the thing they don't explain is playing catch is not competitive pitching. Like, you can still go take ground balls and throw them across the infield. Like, do you have to completely not throw any object at any speed for 3 whole months? I think most people who are in the game realize that that's not an unreasonable thing to do. Like, you could still play catch, you could still, throw flat grounds to someone, work on your off-speed stuff, but just not like really let it go and not really certainly not throw in games, but just like, hey, I'm not going to like pitch for 3 months. I'm just going to still play catch, still throw a baseball. And I think on the surface, you see this effect with weightlifters, with runners. They don't like taking a week off. Their body feels bad when they get back into it, right? If you're especially if you're a heavy lifter, like, you feel like you need to grease the groove is the term. Like, your hips feel better when they're consistently squatting, even if it's just like a light weight. They just like, their bodies tends to stiffen up when they stop. And I think there is something to be said for that. And so you certainly should stop playing competitively and stop pitching competitively, at least probably that 3 months of the year. Give yourself a whole season off. But if you want to go back in the backyard and play catch with your buddies and play catch with your dad and like take ground balls with a friend and play backyard baseball. Of course, I know no one does any of these things, but I think those are all reasonable, valid activities. And I can't imagine that's getting anyone hurt. What's getting people hurt is I play on 3 teams and I pitch 120 innings a year, and I never really give my arm a break from like going full bore. So I think with that being said, I think that's a personal choice. So for me, after pro ball, I needed time off. My body, I was usually like literally in pain at the end of the season. And not to mention, throwing 50 relief innings is a lot. Or throwing 120 plus innings as a starter is a lot. So your body's just like fundamentally different. So you shouldn't take the lesson. Like, this is not what a pro guy does is different than what a kid does. Where a kid who might throw 40 innings in the summer, if they like don't get overused and they had a pretty, they played a lot of different positions, they pitched a decent amount, but not a ton, they can like continue to just like run around, play baseball if they feel good, and that's fine, but just like probably stop pitching for a while. But if you're a high schooler and you played all high school season and had like a really competitive summer season, your body just might need a break. And you say, okay, I'm not going to throw for a while, or I'm just going to play catch for a couple months and not throw. But I think the difference between taking completely time off and just shifting to, I just going to play catch and keep my arm moving, I think either one of those are equally acceptable depending on how your body feels. What do you think?
I think unless you're hurt, you should not stop playing catch. Just playing catch. Whether that doesn't mean
I tend to agree. Yeah, I tend to agree with you.
It doesn't need to be like frequency wise. It doesn't need to be every day. It doesn't need to be 5 days a week. But I mean, personally, I never stopped playing catch. Granted, I wasn't a pitcher, so the stress on my arm is different. But I tend to see kids hurt more when they shut down completely. And then as soon as they get back into it, it's okay. Let's long toss day one. Let's go 150 feet, throw as hard as I can. And they come back. And I was that guy too, because in high school, I played multiple sports. So we didn't have like winter training, right? I went from basketball season to baseball season. March 1st, baseball season in Illinois, where we get outside, it's 40 degrees and I'm throwing the ball. I'm long tossing. And every year in high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, I'd start the first week after the first practice. I'd be at the trainer. We didn't have trainers at the school. We had to go to like an athletic coach, which was new at the time. And he'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, ease into it a little bit. Cause I would just go full go. And I'd be in pain. And I see it with kids a lot too. So I personally, if I had a son who was 13, 14, 15 years old and we got to the end of fall ball, I would still want him playing catch twice a week, 3 times a week, just playing catch. Like keep your arm at like not quite boiling. Like if you're boiling water, like, yeah, you're boiling water all summer and your arm is hot and you're throwing hard. Yeah, tone it back a little bit, but keep the water warm. Like, you don't want to go all the way back down and have to try and revamp up, especially as a younger player when you're trying to consistently improve. Like, if you have your arm in really good shape and then you just let it get out of shape, it's kind of a negative to your development.
I agree, and I think the people from Modus tend to agree with that. Like I know we've had Will Carroll on the show, and a lot of the stuff that they did with the Modus sleeve was on acute versus chronic workload. And so what those two things are, your chronic, I think those terms are like, I think they could make better terms for the public. But chronic workload is your workload over time. So if you're a runner, I'll just use that example, and you run 20 miles a week, that's your chronic workload. 20 miles a week or 80 miles a month, whatever. And then when you have big spikes in your acute workload, so your acute workload is the short-term workload. So if your chronic workload is a month, let's say, that you typically do 80 miles or 80 miles a month or 20 miles a week, and then your acute workload suddenly spikes, so you do 40 miles a week one week, so you like double your workload and you have a big spike. That's where they found that injuries occur. So that you always want to stay, they had this like 20% range, like you never want to go 20% above or 20% below, so you don't want to go 20% below, so you maintain your level of fitness there. You don't want to go 20% above, because above that, you're putting a lot of stress on your body above and beyond what it's capable for. So then if you want to get to doing 40 miles a week, you go from 20 miles a week to 24 miles a week. That's that's a 20% jump. Then to 28 miles a week, then 32 miles, whatever. Obviously, as you get to 30 miles a week, then it's a 6 mile per week jump is 20%. So it would take you a month to ramp up to getting to 40 miles per week. Would that be a safe way of doing it?
Right.
And of course, to your point, which is a good one, kids are like one speed bikes. They don't know what the hell they're doing when they throw. So again, they take all winter off and they're just like long tossing and throwing bullpens 2 weeks later, and they're hurting and they hurt their arms. So pro guys, so again, like using me as an example, yeah, I would take 2 solid months off, because this like get away from me. Like I don't want to touch a ball. My arm feels, it's like physically hurting. I need to recover. But then when I start back up, it's all right. The first week I'm playing catch 3 days a week and I'm making 75 throws, and it's legitimately just playing catch. Then the next week it's 4 days a week at catch. And then the next week it's 5 days a week at catch. Then the next week it's 2 days that are like up to like 75% effort, and 3 days that are 50% effort. Then it's, the next week is 2 days of 90% effort, and the other days are catch days. And it's slowly ramping up just like the same way. All pro guys figure out how to do this. And so I'm building up where I start throwing again in November, and I'm not throwing hard again until middle of December. And then I have a full month of January to throw hard. And then I can back off a little bit for a week. Then I have the full month of February to throw hard. And then I'd be ready essentially to go. If I need to be ready to go in March, or if I was ready to go in April, I'd probably just slow everything down. So I think most people don't realize that it's like a legit 4-month period to get in shape, because you need essentially 6+ weeks to ramp up to throwing full speed. And then you start kind of go back down to bullpens. Now you're 75% off the mound, 90% off the mound, 100% off the mound. Then you want a solid 6 weeks, I think, off the mound at full speed. So if you're like backdating that, if you need to be ready on April 1st, you need to start your full speed bullpens February 15th. And then if you need 8 weeks prior to that, that's January 15th, December 15th. And then, maybe you need longer to ramp up, or just you want to like work more on like developing a new pitch, and you need more time playing catch to like get the grip. So there's that. I mean, it's a long ramp up process, but most people listening to that are probably saying, I really only take like 1 month to ramp up. You start playing catch first day of February and you're full speed last day of February. That's not long enough. It just isn't. And it's also not long enough to make changes to your mechanics. It's not long enough to make changes to develop a new pitch. Like if you want to develop a new pitch, you should be playing catch with it for 8 solid weeks before you start to go faster with it, because you need that many weeks to just like feel it and spin it and really like get used to it at a lower speed. And then you start to ramp that speed up too. And now you really understand that new changeup or that new slide or whatever. So that's where people miss a lot of stuff, is if they do go completely off from throwing, their ramp up sucks. And they get hurt, or they just don't get anything out of their winter either. Like, how do you get anything out of your winter when you ramp up for 1 month? I don't know, So what do you got there, sir?
I mean, you're right. It's just a lot of these guys they have one speed, and that speed is full go. And to like the development side, I mean, if we've got kids in November, December that are coming to like get better and we need to have them play catch, you know, part of that playing catch is probably long tossing or throwing the ball hard, like letting it go. Because we, you know, especially in the winter months, I mean, if we're practicing 3 times a week as like a 15-year-old travel team, that's a lot of practice time in the winter, but it's not a lot of time throwing. You know, it's 3 days a week is not a lot of throwing
No, it's not.
For any age. It's just not a lot of throwing. So we have to have them throw like every day, almost like to keep them baseline, like ready until we can get them outside throwing 4, 5, 6 days a week to get stronger. It's not easy to balance time off. You know, kids always ask about weightlifting time off as well. And my answer is kind of the same. Like, I don't know, what are you taking time off from? Like, you're not a finished product where you can take a little time off and then come back and like polish up. Like you're just a pile of a rock that we need to actually mold into something. So you should be working out and hitting the weight room hard. Like, you have to develop your body before you can like manage a finished product. And pro ball is totally different. I mean, I never stopped throwing as a pro guy. I come back from the season, and granted, I was a middle infielder, so I had a rubber arm to begin with, but at the same time, it's like I'm not stressing, you know, once or twice a week at 120 full max effort throws. So I could do that. Whereas pitchers, it's a little bit different. And if you're a young kid who's pitching a lot of innings in the summer, like, yeah, I see where your parents want to put you in soccer for 6 weeks and just let you not throw, but still don't empty all the water out of the pool, you know?
Yeah. No one's getting hurt from playing catch. I mean, that's the overarching thing. No one's getting hurt from playing catch.
And that's probably the best advice out of the whole thing, right? Is you're not going to get hurt just playing catch, like throwing a baseball, throwing a dodgeball. That's not hurting your arm. It's the
let's not talk about dodgeball. Let's completely leave dodgeball out of that, because dodgeball is a great way to blow out your arm. You go out there and throw the absolute piss out of it, trying to hurt people. Kids hurt their arms every winter throwing. Let's just like you were good until you threw dodgeball in there. Let's not talk about dodgeball.
Are you having some PTSD on a dodgeball incident I'm unaware of?
Dude, no one throws dodgeballs slow. You throw dodgeballs at 110%, trying to.
But you only throw 4 of them because there's only one ball.
That's exactly your point you're just making, that you shouldn't just like go from 0 to 100. That's what people do. That's why you hurt your arm with dodgeball.
No,
you're not
dodgeball,
not in shape. You're just in. Bobby, you're doing so good. You're doing so good today, and then you threw that out there. Literally like
we should end this. We should end this.
Gym class, blowing it out. Terrible thing to do. Don't play dodgeball, kids, but do play lots of catch. But again, catch to a lot of kids is like they're trying to remind themselves how hard they throw every time they play catch, and that's not a good thing either. Catch means up to 70% effort, like firm at best, you know? So like you couldn't throw it more than 120 feet playing catch. Like it wouldn't go far enough. But a lot of kids I know play catch, and if I just didn't catch it, it would just like continue to sail like forever. They're just throwing missiles. Like Andrew Miller in a Major League Baseball game throwing 98, the catcher stops it. Like he's only 60 feet away, but if the catcher didn't stop it, it would continue to go, you know, a long, long way. So using the short distance to say, again, this is a thing you learn from rehab. They do rehab programs by distance. So like you go 40 feet, then 60 feet, then 75, then 90. And they do that with the understanding that like a 75-foot throw means if you're to throw the ball to your partner at 75 feet, it's just firm enough to make it there where it's not loopy, but it's just firm enough where if I didn't catch it, it would go like 10 feet past me and that's that, right? It's not like throwing a missile where if you throw it through me, it goes another 100 feet. That's like the reason they do it that way with rehab programs. But a lot of people don't do it that way either. Guys are like doing their Tommy John rehab and they're throwing missiles at each other from 65 feet. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? Like it's a 60-foot throw. A 60-foot throw means it's got enough oomph to get there on a line, but not much more. That's what 60 feet means. And that if you had a radar gun, that'd be like 55 miles per hour probably. But then you have guys throwing 82 from 60 feet. And like, that's not a 60-foot throw. Because 80 would go 250 feet. So that's a thing to remember. When we say catch, it's like catch. Like
Right.
you overthrow your partner, it's not going for forever. If you throw it and they miss it, it would only go another 10 feet past them before it hit the ground.
Like they could potentially catch it barehanded if needed.
It'd be
Maybe
a dumb
slightly
thing to
harder.
it'd be a dumb thing to do, but yeah, I mean you
Slightly,
could.
that's the speed, like, right? Like throw it so it wouldn't hurt their hand if they snag it barehanded.
And I'd say soft line is the best way to describe it. Like on a line, it's firm, but it's not like a BB. It's got a little bit of like softness to the line.
A BB.
No. Well, Robert, tell us a little bit about our guests for next week and then our format thereafter.
So we've got a couple good guests coming up next week. Tuesday, Ryan Spader, Twitter, the Ace of Spader. If you follow him, he's a baseball analyst, tweets out a lot of like interesting stats, current stats, historical stats, like guys that are on, kind of record paces and stuff like that. So he should be really good on Tuesday. And then Friday, we've got Sam Panayotovich. He's a radio host. He's in the gambling world, based out of Chicago. So that'll pique my interest, definitely. But sports gambling is becoming the norm, kind of all across the country. FanDuel, DraftKings, Barstool Sports just opened up their sports book in Philadelphia. So should be some good conversation with Sam regarding all things gambling on next Friday. And then we move into 1 day a week. Dan and I are moving to 1 day a week. Your favorite podcast is going to get even more, I don't know, elite. I hate that word.
What I do too. Well, what we're going to do is we're no longer going to be live. We'll do YouTube premieres, and it's possible that we'll stream it live. We don't have all the details worked out, but we want production quality to stay the same or improve, and we just feel like this is a better long-term change. So we're going to more consistently have guests, probably every show starting then, and just in general have a more high-quality experience. We're not sure that the twice a week, the way we market it, all this other stuff is best for the show long-term. So we think we put more of our time into marketing it, to letting people know that, hey, this is when it's going on. I have a large email list, all these things. We think one might be better than two. So we'll see how it goes. And if it's a train wreck, then yeah, whatever, we'll reassess. But
there's no way it's going to be a train wreck. Not with this radio IQ that's pumping through these airwaves.
Radio IQ. But
all
right.
Years.
But we appreciate you listening. Thanks for being here. Bob, you want to send them off?
Thanks for listening. We'll see everybody on Tuesday.